Hi, everyone. My name is Michelle, and I work on the data team at Billie, joined by my teammate Lance. And today we're going to share a little bit about how we leverage the modern data stack, and specifically dbt, to power and measure our customer lifecycle marketing initiatives at Billie. So first, for anyone who's unfamiliar with Billie, we're a direct-to-consumer e-commerce company selling body care products for the bathroom. Our most notable product is our razor, but our brand is really known for empowering anyone who identifies as a woman, challenging the traditional expectations of women, and fighting the pink tax, which, if you don't know, is the extra amount women are charged for certain products, like razors. For the purpose of this talk, it's helpful to know that we sell products on varying frequencies. So some of our products, like our razor and our wipes, are available subscription only. Others you can only buy one time, and then the rest are optional. You can go either way. So what that means is that we typically think about our customers in two buckets. So those who have subscribed and those who have not. And then we have like sub-classifications within those. Cool. So at Billie, we're constantly working to ensure that we have the best possible customer retention. We think a lot about once someone makes their first purchase, what is their experience like after that? How can we make sure that they fall in love with the brand, continue to come back, and really turn into lifelong loyal Billie customers? One strategy we use to create a positive customer experience is to send relevant and personal emails. Highlighting just a few examples here, we send replenishment emails. This is where we would proactively reach out to a customer who we suspect might be running low on a product and make it really easy for them to repurchase. Payment failed notifications. So this is where maybe if someone was up for renewal and we weren't able to process their order or send them new products because their payment method changed. And then renewal reminders. Those are when someone's up for renewal in a few days, we might reach out to them and say, you still have time to make any adjustments. Click here. Rather than sending our entire customer base the same email at the exact same time, we really try and make our communications contextually relevant to the individual who's receiving them. So taking a step back, thinking about like actual execution and implementation of these campaigns, when we first decided to implement these types of communications, we realized that the marketing team would need to have up-to-date customer attributes and events in their email platform in order to trigger or segment these audiences. So I won't go through all of these examples again, but just in terms of the replenishment email, some of the attributes that we would rely on to power that email include the most recent purchase date for a given product, maybe the triggers based on if their most recent purchase date is greater than X number of days ago, then they qualify for the email. But we also want to take into account whether they're already subscribed or whether that product's already in their next order. It wouldn't make any sense to say re-up on your body wash if it's already in your next order. We also like to take into account other touch points that the customer's having, knowing whether someone has an open CX ticket. It's not a great experience to reach out to CX one morning and then 30 minutes later receive an email, a promotional email from the brand before you've even had a chance to resolve that issue. And then some other attributes that we maybe rely on more so for the experience and less for the segment building include customer status and time zone. Depending on what your customer status is, we might send you down one of two shopping funnel experiences. If you're an active customer and we're hoping for you to repurchase something, we can just send you right into your account portal where you can add that product to your next order, versus if you don't have an active subscription, you don't have an upcoming order, we'd probably want to send you through checkout. And then lastly, we want to send this message to you at a time that's relevant for you. So also taking into account the time zone of that given user. So a concept that I'm sure everyone here is familiar with is that those attributes do not actually come from or live in a single place. We use about 20 different SaaS platforms to run our business. So that means that data is being aggregated in 20 different places. At this point, we actually had the insight that these attributes and events do in fact live in a single place. They live in our they live in our cloud data warehouse. At the point that we were ideating this framework and this program, this is what our data stack looked like. We were already replicating data from all of our third-party services into our centralized data warehouse using dbt to transform, apply unique business logic, and then produce production level data sets for analysis and looker. So we really already had this unified view of the customer. Here you can see what our lineage graph from dbt looks like for the customer mart. So you can see that we have 70 or so transformations feeding into this single data set that we make accessible to business users. We have a ton of unique business logic. Being a subscription business, what is an active subscriber? All of that methodology is built into dbt. So after deliberating and weighing the pros and cons, we ultimately decided to operationalize our DBT models to power our lifecycle marketing campaigns. At the time that we made this decision, it wasn't super common. There weren't the reverse ETL, quote unquote, companies available on the market. So we had custom scripts that were syncing data from our data warehouse into our ESP. Some of the other options that we could have gone with for getting data into our email platform include like onboarding an ESP that had a direct integration with our SaaS platforms. But as I mentioned, we had about 20. It was very unlikely to find a platform that had all 20 integrations. And then also, how would we integrate our unique business logic in there? If we were to go this route, we probably would have customer status mean something different in our ESP versus our BI tool, which just creates confusion. We could have used a tool like Zapier to accomplish the same thing. But again, that business logic piece is missing. And then we could have asked engineering to build out custom scripts between each of our SaaS platforms and our ESP, but that just seems like duplicative work for them to, implement and maintain that unique business logic on their end as well. This is what our stack looks like today. We are still replicating raw data from all of our different data sources into our centralized data warehouse, cleaning it up, transforming it in DBT, and then from there using Census. So we had originally written custom scripts, but we've since migrated to Census and we are never looking back. They have a really nice DBT integration. We're super happy with that platform. And so Census is reading from a collection of different models to sync attributes and events directly into Customer.io, which is our email platform. This is an example of a customer profile in our ESP, Customer.io. And so as you can see, this customer has attributes, a bunch of different attributes that are coming from a bunch of different sources, and they're all being updated via one single script, one job through Census, as opposed to multiple scripts for each platform. So at this point, the marketing team has the ability to create those contextual email campaigns, and they're being powered by our cloud data warehouse. That's all well and good, but how do we know that they're actually working? How do we know that they're moving the needle for the business and it actually improving retention?
Cool, thanks, Michelle. So sending an email can lead Billie customers to take a few different actions. They can purchase a product immediately through the website, reach out to our CX team to add a product to their upcoming shipment, visit their account portal to make adjustments to their subscription. And there's just a lot of different moving parts that we need to take into account. And it's not enough to say that we sent this email and we made X amount of dollars in sales and just call it a day. We also want to know how sending an email can impact long-term performance on metrics like retention, CX inbounds, and ultimately just like the overall sense of customer lifetime value. So the question becomes, what's the best way that we can incorporate all these actions and assess the true impact of a given email campaign? And so we looked at 3 different email methodologies to measure attribution. There was first click-through attribution, where we assign credit based on whether a customer clicks through the email and performs an action. This is great for us because it's easily attributable to a campaign via UTM parameters. However, it doesn't necessarily account for actions that were taken off our website. So if I reached out to CX by email, like that sort of interaction would not be integrated into this click-through attribution. It also doesn't account for the fact that some customers would have taken the action anyway. And by simply sending the email, we got the customer to think more about the action that they were going to take sooner and later, and they ended up doing it earlier than they would have in that cycle. We also took a look at view-through attribution, where we give credit based off of whether a customer receives an email and then takes an action within some sort of time lag period. And this is a little bit better than our click-through attribution, as it captures actions that aren't directly tied to a click. However, it gets messy and less interpretable when there's more than one campaign active. And just like click-through attribution, it doesn't necessarily account for the fact that, again, some of these customers would have taken the action anyway. So we moved on and we took another look at holdout attribution, where we compare a holdout group to those who receive an email. And this was particularly interesting to us. And we thought that the use case was pretty comprehensive for what we were trying to measure, in that it isolates the impact of the email alone while controlling for outside variables, as well as accounting for these actions that were taken offsite, which covers the pitfalls of click-through attribution and view-through attribution. However, there was a significant upfront cost needed to establish this framework. And after much deliberation, we ended up deciding that building out the holdout framework is probably the best way to go. So for each email campaign, the marketing team would use customer IO's built-in decision tree functions to randomly assign users test and control groups, and would use their attribute update feature to record which variant the user was assigned to. So if you were in the test group, you would get test receives email, control does not receive email. We kept it within that platform so that when it came to piping in the data, and once the campaign goes live, the data team takes that and explicitly pulls through that attribute from our raw customer IO data within our warehouse and then into our customer mart, and then expose it as a new attribute within Looker. We would then build a custom dashboard for that experiment for us to monitor results. And so after a few weeks of work, we finally released the dashboard, and it was a great success. The data team, the marketing team was able to measure the incrementality of an email, and they were really interested in what the data had to say. And this actually sparked a lot of different conversations between data and the marketing team to think about better ways to better improve our retention policies or our email communications. With every data project, there's always opportunity to optimize. And so we saw that there were two key opportunities to make things better. First, for each new email, the data team explicitly pulled in new attributes and had to build a new dashboard with custom logic built in every single time. And this kind of made us the bottleneck to even start conducting and measuring these campaign analyses. And as we ramped up the program and deployed more experiments, our libraries of dashboards within Looker started to become a little bit more unwieldy. This was really counterintuitive to what our goal was of making data searchable and easily navigatable to our data customers. So we had to make it a little bit more scalable. Another area of opportunity we saw was our retention analyses. And what we saw was that the main attribute that was driving retention was a slowly changing dimension. And this made it very difficult for us to look back at historical campaigns and even make an apples to apples comparison for two campaigns at a given point in time, which is something that stakeholders wanted after seeing this dashboard, but it was not something that the data team was currently equipped to answer. So we went back to the drawing board and we identified a few levers for improving our process. So we still wanted marketing to control what they wanted to test within customer IO. And we took advantage of customer IO's liquid templates to create an attribute snippet. And what this attribute snippet would do is at the time of the email being sent, it would pull together relevant data like the time of assignment, the customer status at the time of send, and package it as a string and send it to the data warehouse. And this was fundamentally different from what we had done in our first iteration, as all the nuances and all the custom logic that the marketing team had given us to build out in our custom dashboard was now baked into this one string. So we didn't have to do that customization. We also moved from wide to long tables for our attributes, which allowed us to implicitly pass through all the attribute assignments in our DBT models. And this allowed us to spend less time actually maintaining the experiment pipeline and also solved our multiple Looker dashboard problem that was a little bit downstream. Rather than have a new dashboard per new column, we could swap the dashboard on the same page by just swapping out the attribute name. And that made it a lot less cluttered and a little bit more searchable. Finally, we used DBT to snapshot customer status, which was super powerful and allowed us to look back at a customer status at various points in time. And so this opened up a ton of cool new opportunities for time-based analysis. And we were able to build survival analysis frameworks with this and expose them within Looker. So how does this actually work in practice? As data flows through from our DBT models to Census, attributes such as the customer status, which we are using to derive the retention metric, it gets picked up by customer IO. And at the time of send, customer IO uses the liquid templating and passes through a concatenated string containing the customer's status at the time of send and other relevant metadata, which we then parse and clean using DBT. From there, we apply a lot more DBT magic and leverage a bunch of the snapshots as well as a bunch of diff functions to build a data model that supports this historical analysis. And so today, what we have is a dynamic experimentation portal for analyzing performance. The data team is now spending less time building and maintaining the pipeline and more time working with marketing to consult on how to best build or frame an experiment. We now have a single portal to view and toggle between experiments. So there's no need to be a little bit confused or just, it's a lot easier to search through. And we still kept the ability to measure the true impact of a campaign, which our stakeholders know and love. But we also added the ability to look back on historical performance and see things frozen in time. So with this new experiments portal, the marketing team now has a better understanding and visualization of how our campaigns work in the grand scheme of things.
So to recap, we really feel like DBT plus other platforms have helped us supercharge our lifecycle marketing. Without DBT, this work would have been significantly more difficult to implement and challenging to maintain. Just taking a look at some of the wins or like the benefits of this approach that we've taken. We do have this single source of truth still. All of our unique business logic within the entire organization is maintained in one place, DBT. The data team is naturally given a seat at the table given this framework, which is really nice because we can help feed into strategy and vet approaches for validating hypotheses and all that good stuff. The marketing team can obviously deploy and measure the true impact of their campaign with truly zero data team resources at this point. We also just generally have a stronger business intuition around emails. If we're planning on sending an email one day, we can guarantee what's going to happen after that. Somewhat underrated, but our ESP is also really tidy. There's a lot of consistency between the ESP and our business intelligence tool in terms of the way that attributes are labeled. And most importantly, we are also sending customers communications that are relevant to them. So some things to consider about this approach: our ESP is not updated in real time, rather hourly, which has been fine for us, but is something that we do need to take into account when we're setting up new campaigns. And then, of course, the biggest thing, the work of the data team now has direct implications on not only analyses, but the customer experience as well. So it's super important that our data is accurate, trustworthy, reliable to create a great customer experience. So that's just one of the ways that we use DBT at Billie. We're really big fans of the product. If you've worked on a similar problem or just have any thoughts, we'd love to chat. We're also hiring, so on the data team, but also across the board. So feel free to Slack us if you want to learn more about those opportunities. And yeah, thank you so much, Brooklyn Data, for having us.
Thank you both for that wonderful presentation. As April mentioned in the Slack channel, we're taking any questions for Billie folks. So if you want to drop any there.
I've got one. Like, that's a lot. How long did that take you to? It's so complex and impressive. Like, how long did it take you to build? And like, where do the rest of us mere mortals start if we want to try to attempt something like that?
So in terms of the operational analytics, the initial setup wasn't too difficult. Maybe it was like, because we already had all of our DBT models in the data warehouse for BI, for Looker. Setting up the scripts to sync with customer IO wasn't too much work, but the maintenance was actually really annoying. We did not have like proper retry handling. So since moving to Census though, we've actually had zero maintenance for our team, which has been great. In terms of the framework, Lance can speak to this a little bit more, but I think the biggest thing is the scoping and the planning. And then now that everything's set up, which took maybe 1, 2, or 3 sprints worth of work, it's all just like maintenance mode now, and there's not that much work on our end.
Yeah, so just to speak to that, the good thing about this kind of iterative design is we know after every sprint what we want to change next, and from that perspective, we were able to just plan things pretty well. And if there were like some problems that came up, we would just like table the conversation, and we think it's better to like get it to like maybe 80% and then like hack at the rest of the 20% versus like just build out 100% and then have it potentially fail. So yeah, that iterative design was probably very key in when it came to building out our process.
Other questions? Feel free to Slack in the channel if you got them.
Yeah, and you can always ask the questions later too if they pop up.
Quick question for me, actually. You alluded to it that it's not real time. I guess 2 questions. Like, one, have you had to change the timing or frequency of your DBT runs given that type of latency concern for communications? And like 2, if not, like how do you handle the time sensitive nature of a communication going out versus like when a particular model may be running in the background?
Yeah, we were already running our jobs every hour. We have not a real-time dashboard, but we do like to give stakeholders the ability to see like somewhat up-to-date sales for the day in Looker. So we were already doing it every hour. And then a lot of the campaigns, there's the possibility that someone could switch their status, be sent an email, and maybe they were sent the wrong one, but like just the implications aren't too big for us. We're doing it every hour. And if there's a campaign where it could be super critical that it's like the most up-to-date at the point of send, then we'll push back on marketing and figure out another solution.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Thanks.
Yes, our data is being synced into our warehouse every like 15 minutes, and then our jobs are running every hour. So it's a lot, I think, probably relatively speaking, but it's working for us.